I came home late that night, exhausted from a 12-hour shift that had drained every bit of energy I had left. My feet ached, my head throbbed, and all I wanted was to make a cup of tea, take a shower, and collapse into bed. But the moment I opened the apartment door, the smell hit me like a slap in the face, something between rotten leftovers and sour milk. My stomach turned. I didn't even have to look. I already knew what it was. The sink. Again. I dropped my bag by the door and walked slowly toward the kitchen, silently praying that maybe, just maybe, this time it wouldn't be as bad. But as soon as I turned the corner, I froze. The entire counter was buried under piles of plates, cups, and pots crusted with food. Some had turned gray-green with mold. One bowl had tiny fruit flies buzzing around it. I stared at it all in disbelief, the rage bubbling somewhere deep inside my chest. She did it again. I'd told her so many times. I'd begged, argued, left notes, even washed her dishes out of pure desperation. But nothing ever changed. The worst part, she always acted like I was the one overreacting. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a second before I typed. Seriously, again? You promised you'd clean them today. The typing dots appeared for a moment, then disappeared. A few seconds later, her message popped up. I said I'll do it when I can. Stop nagging. That was it. No sorry, no acknowledgement, nothing. My blood boiled. I'd spent the entire week working double shifts, barely sleeping, and she couldn't even be bothered to rinse a damn plate? I stood there for a full minute, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a shaky laugh. Something inside me snapped in that exact moment. I didn't plan it. I didn't think. I just acted. I rolled up my sleeves and started grabbing every single dirty dish. Plates, cups, forks, spoons, pots, everything. The greasy ones, the moldy ones, the ones stuck together like fossils. I carried them down the hall to her room, the sound of clinking dishes echoing behind me. Her door was half open. The sight of her perfectly made bed made something twist inside me. She had time to make her bed, to scroll on her phone for hours, to binge-watch shows, but not to clean up her mess. I dumped the first pile right on her pillow. The sound of ceramic hitting fabric was strangely satisfying. Then another stack. And another. I kept going until her blankets were buried under crusted plates and slimy cups. I could smell the leftover pasta sauce, the dried-up curry, and something I couldn't even identify. I went back to the kitchen, filled a bowl with that disgusting brown dishwater, and without a second thought, poured it right over her pillow. It soaked in, dark and smelly, dripping down onto the floor. My heart was racing, but it wasn't guilt, it was relief. Pure, unfiltered relief. When I stepped back and looked at what I'd done, I should have felt horrified. But I didn't. I felt calm, like all the frustration I'd been swallowing for months had finally found its way out. I cleaned my hands, took a deep breath, and went to my room. I didn't even bother explaining. I just shut my door, turned off the light, and lay down. For the first time in weeks, I slept easily. The next morning, I woke up to screaming. Her voice echoed through the hallway, sharp and high-pitched. What the hell is wrong with you? Are you insane? I stayed in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling. I'd known this was coming. She burst into my room without knocking. Her face was red, her hair wild, and her hands were shaking as she pointed toward the hallway. You destroyed my bed. You're psycho. You've gone too far. I sat up slowly. Oh, did I? Because I've been asking you to wash your dishes for months, and you never do. You turned our kitchen into a biohazard. That doesn't mean you can trash my room, she shouted. There's mold on my blanket, on my sheets. You poured dirty water on my pillow. I stood up and faced her. Good. Maybe now you'll remember what that sink looks like. Her jaw dropped. You're seriously proud of this? I'm done asking nicely, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You don't listen to words, so maybe you'll listen to consequences. She stared at me for a second, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then she grabbed her phone. You're paying for this. I'm calling the landlord. You're getting kicked out. I laughed, bitter and tired. Go ahead. Tell him why. Maybe I'll show him the pictures of your science experiment in the sink. Her eyes widened. She didn't expect that. For a second, she looked almost unsure. Then she turned away, muttering curses under her breath, slamming her door so hard that one of the plates slid off her bed and shattered on the floor. I sank back onto my bed and covered my face with my hands. My heart was still pounding. I knew I'd gone too far. But for once, it felt like she finally got it. The silence that followed was heavy. A small part of me wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. What if she really got me kicked out? What if this blew up worse than I imagined? But another part of me, deeper, angrier, whispered that she had it coming. Because sometimes when people keep pushing your boundaries, politeness stops working. That was the moment I realized. Revenge doesn't always look like shouting or fighting. Sometimes, it's the quiet satisfaction of watching someone face the mess they created. But I didn't know then that this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Even the air in the apartment seemed thicker, heavy with tension and the faint, sour smell of the crime scene I'd created in her bedroom. I could hear muffled noises from behind her door, the sound of her pacing, drawers opening and slamming, and the occasional frustrated groan. I stayed in my room for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I didn't regret what I'd done. But a small knot of unease had started to grow in my stomach. Maybe it was because of how quiet she was now. She wasn't the type to stay quiet for long. Eventually, I heard her door swing open. She stomped down the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp. "Yes, Mr. Daniels, I need to speak to you right away," she said loudly, clearly wanting me to hear. "It's about my roommate. She destroyed my property." "Yes, destroyed. There's food and mold all over my bed." I exhaled slowly. So she actually went through with it. She passed by my room, shooting me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You're done here," she said. I told him everything. "You're getting kicked out." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just met her gaze and said, "Make sure you tell him why I did it." She rolled her eyes. "You think anyone's going to care about some dishes? You poured dirty water on my bed. You're insane." "Then maybe don't live like a raccoon," I muttered. Her face flushed red. "You're disgusting." "No," I said quietly. "You are." She gasped, like she couldn't believe I'd dared to say it, then turned and stormed out, slamming the front door behind her. The echo lingered through the apartment. I sat there for a moment, rubbing my temples. The adrenaline from last night had faded, leaving me with exhaustion and a faint sense of dread. I knew the landlord would probably call soon. Mr. Daniels wasn't exactly the understanding type. Sure enough, about an hour later, my phone buzzed. "Mr. Daniels, can you come down to the office at 2 p.m.? There's been a complaint about property damage." I sighed. Here we go. The next few hours crawled by. I cleaned the kitchen just to keep myself occupied, scrubbing away every trace of last night's chaos. The sink was spotless now. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I got to the office, Mr. Daniels was sitting behind his desk, his usual bored expression in place. My roommate was already there, sitting stiffly in the chair beside him, arms crossed, looking like she'd just survived a war. He gestured for me to sit. "So," he said, glancing between us, "you two seem to be having issues." "That's one word for it," I muttered. "She destroyed my bed," my roommate burst out. "She dumped food all over it, moldy food. She poured dirty water on my pillow. I had to throw everything out." Mr. Daniels raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "Is that true?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I did. I won't deny it." She smirked, as if she'd already won. "But," I continued, leaning forward, "I didn't do it for fun. I did it because she's been leaving dirty dishes in the sink for weeks. Food rotting, bugs crawling, mold growing. I have photos if you'd like to see." That wiped the smirk right off her face. I unlocked my phone and slid it across the desk. Mr. Daniels scrolled through the photos silently. The overflowing sink, the crusted plates, the flies hovering around. His eyebrows knit together. "Good Lord," he muttered. I folded my arms. "I've asked her nicely for months. I've done her dishes myself. She doesn't care. I came home after a 12-hour shift last night to this, and I just snapped. I know it was wrong, but I've been living in filth because of her." He leaned back, sighing. "You both sound like you've had enough of each other." "Exactly," she said quickly. "So kick her out." He shook his head. "That's not how it works, Emily. You both signed the lease. I can't just evict someone because you two can't get along. But this," he pointed at me, "was out of line. And so is leaving a kitchen like that." She started to argue, but he raised a hand. "You'll both get a warning. Clean up your act. If there's another incident, you're both out." "Got it." I nodded silently. Emily didn't. She sat back, glaring at me like she wanted to set me on fire. When we left the office, the walk back was pure silence. The only sound was the gravel crunching under our shoes. As soon as we reached the apartment, she turned to me. You got lucky. That's all. You think you won? Just wait. I'll make your life miserable. I met her eyes. You already have. She scoffed and went inside, slamming her door once again. That night, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I made dinner, cleaned up, watched something on my laptop. But every sound from her room made me tense. I could hear her moving around, muttering to herself, slamming drawers. She was furious, and the kind of furious that doesn't cool down easily. Then, around midnight, I heard her door creak open. I froze. Footsteps padded down the hall. The refrigerator door opened, then closed. Then silence. When I went to get a glass of water an hour later, the kitchen looked normal, except for one thing. My mug, the one I used every morning, was sitting on the counter filled with what looked like milk. But the smell hit me before I even got close. It was sour. Old. Spoiled. She'd left it there on purpose. I felt my jaw tighten. So this was how it was going to be. Over the next few days, it only got worse. She stopped talking to me completely, but she made her point in other ways. Leaving trash near my door, turning the thermostat up to unbearable levels, slamming cabinets at random hours. It was childish, but it worked. Every little noise set my nerves on edge. I started avoiding the apartment as much as possible, staying late at work, eating out, walking aimlessly just to kill time. Every time I came back, I half expected another scene. Then one night, I found a note taped to my bedroom door. Hope you enjoy living with a psycho. I'm moving out next week. But you're paying for my mattress. I read it twice, feeling a strange mix of relief and resentment. She was leaving. Finally. But even now, she wanted to make sure she had the last word. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Good riddance, I whispered. But as I stood there, in the quiet of the apartment, surrounded by the faint smell of bleach and the ghosts of our arguments, I realized something. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't make the silence afterward any less heavy. And deep down, I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. A week later, the apartment felt emptier, but not in a peaceful way. Her door was open now, the once cluttered room stripped bare except for the faint yellow stains on the carpet and the faint smell of dampness that no amount of air freshener could hide. The dishes were gone, the drama was over, and yet the silence that filled the apartment felt almost too quiet, like the calm after a storm that left everything in ruins. I thought I'd feel free when she left. I didn't. I still woke up expecting to hear her music blasting at 2 a.m. or find her shoes in the hallway. I still paused before using the sink, half expecting another pile of dishes waiting for me. It was like she had left a ghost version of herself behind, one that whispered, "You went too far." The first few days after she moved out were strange. The landlord hadn't said anything more, and I was grateful for that. I kept the apartment spotless, cooked my own meals, and came home to peace for the first time in months. But peace, I learned, can sometimes feel like guilt in disguise. Then, 3 days after she'd left, I came home from work to find the front door slightly ajar. My stomach tightened instantly. I froze, listening. The lights were off, but there was a faint sound from the kitchen, metal clinking softly. I stepped inside slowly. Hello. No answer. When I turned the corner, I stopped cold. Emily was standing in front of the counter, wearing a hoodie, her hair tied back messily. She was washing the dishes. My dishes. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. She turned her head slightly, a strange smile playing on her lips. You didn't lock the door. My throat went dry. What the hell are you doing here? Just cleaning, she said, voice light but laced with something cold. You wanted me to do the dishes, right? I took a step forward. You don't live here anymore. She kept scrubbing a plate, slow and deliberate. You ruined my bed. You think you can just throw someone's stuff around, humiliate them, and then move on like nothing happened. I clenched my fists. You deserved it. You made my life miserable. Her smile faded. She turned off the water and faced me fully. No, you just couldn't handle not being in control. You didn't want a roommate, you wanted a maid. That's not true. Oh, come on, she interrupted. You think I don't know people like you? The responsible ones who think they're better than everyone else. You were dying to teach me a lesson. Well, congratulations, you did. She took a step closer, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, dark circles, trembling hands, but also something sharper. Resentment. Get out, I said quietly. She tilted her head. You really don't get it, do you? She pulled her phone from her pocket and waved it. I recorded everything. The dishes. The mold. The bed. All of it. You think people won't believe me? Roommate destroys my property. You'd be amazed how fast a story spreads. I felt my stomach drop. You wouldn't. Oh, I would. The room felt colder. My voice came out lower, tighter. Why come back, Emily? Why not just move on? She hesitated for the first time, her expression flickering. Because you made me feel small. Every time you glared at me over the sink, every message, every note, it was like you were reminding me I wasn't good enough. And I wanted you to feel that too. The words stung more than I wanted to admit, because part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. I had looked down on her. Maybe I hadn't meant to, but I did. I took a slow breath. You're right, I said finally. I did lose control. I went too far. And if you want to post that video, do it. Maybe I deserve it. But you broke me first. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the phone tighter. For a moment, her anger faltered. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something softened in her eyes. Then she set the phone down on the counter. You know what? Forget it. I don't care anymore. She turned to leave, but just before walking out the door, she said quietly, without looking back, You were right about one thing, though. Sometimes people only learn through consequences. The door closed behind her, and this time, it stayed closed for good. I stood there for a long while, staring at the phone she'd left on the counter. My reflection stared back at me in the black screen, tired, hollow-eyed, and unsure if I'd won or lost. Later that night, I sat by the window, the city lights flickering outside, and thought about everything that had happened. Revenge had felt good for a heartbeat, but guilt lingered much longer. Maybe Emily was messy. Maybe I was controlling. Maybe we'd both brought out the worst in each other. But one thing was certain. The apartment wasn't haunted by dishes anymore. It was haunted by regret. I learned that sometimes revenge doesn't clean the mess. It just moves it somewhere else. And as I turned off the light and lay down, I whispered into the silence. If I were in this situation again, I'd walk away before I ever let someone drive me this crazy. Because revenge might win you the battle, but it never fixes what's broken inside you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.